There are plenty of tips for a successful ride on a monster ride like the London PRL, a route that is probably one of the most daunting rides on Zwift. Having a good fuel strategy, a pace plan, a good night's rest, and proper fueling leading into the event will ultimately help you have a successful and enjoyable ride. I, on the other hand, did absolutely nothing. Cramp. Ah! Oh, shit. That sucks. Leading into the London PRL, I had done back-to-back days of 117 kilometers and 105 kilometers on the bike, and I threw in a threshold interval ride on Trainer Road with sets of under-overs just for good measure. I simply woke up, saw the ride, signed up, skipped breakfast. Not a good plan. How long is this going to take? A long time. I'm sure we're going to go through a full range of emotions. For anybody who's done any long endurance ride, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Unbeknownst to me, fellow YouTuber Ryan Condon was in the event looking to complete this epic challenge of the London PRL and grab the route badge. He was sitting in the pen directly behind me, but I had no idea. Had I known early on, riding with friends is also a great strategy for a successful ride and may have changed the way I had approached things. Lining up on the start line, I was surprised to see how many people were here for the event. I think there's 1,000 people signed up for the ride. There's about 300 in the pen. A total of 1,210 people had signed up. Every single one of them were ready to take on this extremely challenging route. Every single one of them with a game plan. Why not? Why not? I, on the other hand, still had no idea in my head what exactly my plan was or how I was going to approach this. All I knew is that it wasn't going to be easy. I'm sure we're going to go through a full range of emotions. For anybody who's done any long endurance ride, you know exactly what I'm talking about. The PRL full route was released with the original London map back in 2018, and the intent was to mimic the length, but not the actual roads, of the in real life Prudential Ride London event. Many people call this
the hardest course on Zwift.
And that is for good reason. In contrast to Zwift's other long routes, the PRL full is quite simple. It's just 11 laps of the London Loop.
What?
Sounds simple enough, but simple doesn't mean easy, especially when we are talking about riding up Box Hill.
Right, shut up a second and I'll tell you.
The 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Box Hill 11 times. That is redonkulous. The route is a total of 173.5 kilometers with a total elevation gain of 2,625 meters. And we're off. It took me just over a kilometer to come to the realization of what I had impulsively signed up for. For me, it isn't as much about the distance as it is about the elevation. I'm not a climber, and especially inside on the trainer. While I have done epic climbs such as the Highwood Pass,
line chart goes like this.
Nice. Which is the highest paved road in Canada at an elevation of 2,206 meters, as well as other climbs in the Canadian Rockies and the Haut route, I knew, given the number of times we went up Box Hill, this was going to be extremely tough. Now the race was on and I had no real plan. It was time to come up with some sort of strategy. First was to do my best to find people with a similar pace. A few kilometers in, we caught up to the man himself, Eric Min. That's Eric right there, little yellow. For those of you who don't know who Eric is, he is the CEO of Zwift. Over the past 10 years, he has ridden every single piece of pavement in Zwift's virtual world. But the one thing he had yet to complete was the full PRL and obtain the badge. Eric was moving at a reasonable pace and was likely to keep a good-sized group around him, so the plan at that point became stick with Eric. It wasn't long before we started heading up Box Hill for the first time. I stuck with Eric and his large crew all the way up to gain the benefit of the draft and hoped that it would be a reasonable pace, which I found it was. And it wasn't too long before we started heading back downhill at high speed into London. As we hit speeds of 92 kilometers an hour, sticking with this group, I knew it was going to take some nice chunks out of the total distance with some relatively low effort and good recovery involved. A quick punch up everybody's 15% gradient elevator, and it was time for a bit of flat and recovery, and then back ultimately to Box Hill for the next lap. Overall, a good lap at a pace that was completely reasonable. 30 minutes into the ride, it was all systems go as people started breaking out the coffee breaks. Now, coffee breaks are one of those contentious things in Zwift where you can take 3 minutes of non-pedaling to stick with the group. Personally, I find them useful. It makes things like when I forget to plug in my laptop a lot easier to deal with than having to scramble off my bike during a race to plug it in because you get a low battery warning. Oh no, did it again. I knew I would be taking my fair share of these because, number one, with zero planning and only 2 bottles of electrolytes, it would maybe get me through the first couple hours. And without breakfast, I was going to have to source some fuel of some sort, or I would face that inevitable massive bonk. As we headed into the second lap, there was still a good group with Eric, and we were maintaining a great pace. We were averaging about 33 kilometers an hour, meaning that we were on pace to complete the entire London PRL around the 5-hour mark. When you consider top riders will crush the route in 4.5 hours with zero plan, things were looking actually pretty good. While we may not have been in the neighborhood of the record holder for the route, Stefan Kitchmer, who did it in 3 hours and 58 minutes, at this point I was optimistic as my current fitness, fatigue, and lack of planning that things were actually going better than expected. But that was short-lived. Any experienced rider will tell you that on a massive endurance ride, you will go through a wide range of feelings and emotions on the bike. From a euphoric feeling to some pretty dark places and everything in between. On the third lap, things went from going better than expected to I'm hungry and I can feel the work from the days prior. I could feel the group slowly starting to pull away. While I was doing 3.2 watts per kilogram and deploying the feather power up that I luckily had, the group was moving what I felt was a little bit faster. I was just hanging on. I quickly punched the watts, which would move me back into the group, but no sooner than gaining a better spot, I would find myself falling off the back again. Then there it was. I was on the verge of getting dropped, I was in trouble, and I knew it. Not preparing was about to kick me square in the face. I was about to enter a very dark place. With all my ill preparations, a ride that I hadn't planned on doing was about to end early. However, at that moment, a ride that I had started on a whim with no real plan mattered more than anything. It was time for me to get out of the saddle and get back into it. My impromptu plan of staying with the group, my friends, were almost 5 seconds down the road on a climb, and it seemed like a very tall order to get back in it. The group around Eric was slipping away. The one thing I did have was live stream chat, offering encouragement and cheering me on. So inadvertently, by deciding to live stream the ride, I had friends, my group, that were there to offer me encouragement and essentially increase my chances, helping me push me back out of the darkness. Somehow, I managed to fight my way back into the group. As I returned, I noticed fellow YouTuber Road to A in the group and was happy to see that I wasn't the only one here. Again, it was time for the downhill and a much needed recovery. With 3 laps in, despite nearly getting dropped, we were still in a good position. Or so I thought. Entering the climb for the 4th time, it was apparent my legs were not going to cooperate. I wasn't going to be able to maintain the pace needed to stick with Eric and his group for the entire ride. So that's when the inevitable happened. I was dropped. Now, I was by myself, no group, no plan, nobody around me. I needed to find somebody with a similar place to work with. This is when one of the most interesting things on the ride happened, and that was seeing a rider with a red check mark. For those of you who don't know, the red check mark in Zwift is an honor held for verified pro athletes. In this case, it was none other than Barry Bonds, a former Major League Baseball All-Star. This ultimately gave me a second wind. Realizing that I was about to lap Barry,
Not Barry
and figured
Bonds?
that if I was 27 minutes ahead of an athlete to the caliber of Barry Bonds, I was doing all right. A little spark in my competitive nature always manages to give me that little bit of drive, even when it isn't a race. The issue now became I was spending a lot of time riding with virtually no one around. However, when the opportunities arose to take a coffee break and latch onto a group, I took it, as well as finding some fuel, which started off as a bag of gummy bears that just happened to be sitting on the counter. I continued much of the ride solo with the occasional period of drafting on small groups. What I didn't realize is that a bigger challenge was ahead, one that I didn't foresee.
Cramp, 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 cramp.
After contracting a respiratory virus on my return from Malaysia and having been off the bike for about a month, I had been having muscle cramps that came out of nowhere. This forced me to ease off the power as I knew that with 80 kilometers to go, if I pushed too hard, that it would end my ride and result in me not getting to finish the route. I just had to be conscientious, make sure that I was consistently drinking electrolytes and not pushing too hard up the climbs. On climb 7, to further help manage the cramps, I would jump off the bike on the downhill to give my body a little bit of rest from the static position that I had been in for the last 3.5 hours. Despite having no plan, we were now making a plan on the fly. While utilizing the stops to grab candy as fuel and more bottles of electrolytes, the cramps were becoming more and more frequent and much more painful. We continued to push, taking care not to push too hard, and thankfully, bottles were now being delivered to me.
Oh, thank you so much, hon. Thank you, thank you.
With less than 50 kilometers to go, it was a strong possibility that a cramp at any moment could end my ride.
All right, I gotta stop for a sec here.
The cramps had slowed me down so much that I once again caught sight of Eric Min.
And there's Eric. Small group now, holy.
Granted, he was lapping me, and I was in no position to latch onto that group and ride with them without risking extreme cramps. So we watched as he rode off on what would be Eric's final climb. For me, on the other hand, I would be on the receiving end of a cramp in my quadricep that would stop me dead in my tracks.
Oh, shit. That sucks. Oh my God. Inside my quad, calves are fine for a moment.
At this point, the pain was so consistent and so bad, I didn't know if I could even make it up the climb without cramping at all.
Yeah, there. Oh, I can't even spin the. Use this coffee break. Ooh, it's tight.
Clearly, It was going to be a battle, and a battle that I might not win.
This is all 1 foot.
Somehow we continued on, and now we only had one climb remaining, so there was still a possibility we could do this. While the 5-hour time that we had hoped for was completely out the window, it was honestly just about finishing the route at this point. It was me against the cramps, against the climb. It was anybody's battle. Somehow we made it over the final climb, and while in a lot of pain from the cramping, the final 15 kilometers were a welcome sight, along with the final animation for the Box Hill KOM for that day. We were awarded an Imperial Century jersey, which actually brought a smile to my face, and the start of what would become a second win. That, and chat was telling me that Ryan was in the race.
Especially, like I said, since we started cramping up, the last 50K has been absolutely brutal. But I will say this, telling me Ryan's a minute behind me makes me want to push, because I don't want to get caught, because I'm a competitive guy.
Helped give my competitive nature a nudge in this non-race to get it done. Ryan got this race done with class, and if you want to see an amazing video, please check out his channel. His video actually inspired me to create this, something well beyond the usual live streams that I just do. With the final 10 kilometers remaining, my mood lightened as I knew the end was coming near. I just didn't know how near, as the dark place returned. It wasn't cramps or lack of preparation that ended my ride. I didn't quit, but my laptop froze. I was unceremoniously dumped out of the event. 5 hours, 46 minutes, and 32 seconds. My ride was over. No finish line, no exhilaration, just black. What had started as an impulse ended as quickly as it started. Despite being an epic battle, it was over, and there was nothing I could do about it. While in that moment I was disappointed, I have to say it was a ride that tested my character and pushed me to the edge, and that next time we do the PRL, we will do it with friends and with a plan, rather than just randomly starting an event on a Saturday because it popped up on my event feed. Anyways, no matter how you look at it, it was hard, and looking back, I enjoyed every second of the experience and will be more than happy to do again. I want to congratulate everyone that entered, whether they completed or not. It is always worth trying something you have never done before, no matter the outcome. Again, congratulations to Ryan Condon for completing the route, and without the inspiration of his YouTube video, you wouldn't be watching this. So maybe next time I attempt this route, I will put out my attempt for the world to join us. Thanks again for watching, and until next time.